Hi, I'm Juliet Glassroth. I am the founder and owner of Glassroth Creative Strategies. As a communicator dealing in this very chaotic environment, I know I have been thinking a lot about what my role is. And I've been discussing that with colleagues like my friend Emma and my friend Amanda, who are also joining me in this discussion today. As we've had these discussions, we thought they might prove interesting for you as well, whether you are a fellow communicator or you are someone who's looking for communication support in your organization, or you just want to understand what value communications can bring to you during such a turbulent time. So we are having this conversation and we're sharing it with you, and we hope you find it valuable.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm the founder of Imprint Communications, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Juliet and Amanda, fellow strategic communicators like me, navigating the reality of an ever-evolving business landscape. Together, we'll discuss the value of strategic communications to support organizations like you to meet the moment. Looking forward to the discussion.
All right, great. And I'm Amanda. I'm excited to talk with both my friends Juliet and Emma today about the current landscape of communications and our place in the world.
Let's start with question 1. Does the world really need another communications consultant, and why?
So I work a lot with nonprofit organizations who do incredible work. I specifically wanted to work with mission-driven organizations. A lot of these organizations oftentimes, their money is going to programmatic work. So my mission has always been to ensure that that doesn't stand in the way of them amplifying their work, telling their stories, and using communications to meet their goals. Why shouldn't they have communication support to help them do that? So I wanted to provide a pathway for these organizations to be able to access communication services in a way that fits their budget, is nimble, and is scalable for them. So I would say yes. The world does need communications consultants, arguably now more than ever, because it is, Emma mentioned the word fractional, and I think that's a really important theme, because it is surge support in many respects. It is not a commitment. And right now, organizations are rightly afraid of making long-term commitments, but with consultants, you don't have to do that, but you also don't have to skip out on having access to strategic communications.
I'll say we're living through chaos. Nonprofits have been shattered by federal cuts. Startups are confronting shifting investments, and change is today's constant. And the reality is that organizations have to meet the moment. And that's why we're having this conversation. So it's a yes and in terms of, does the world really need another communications consultant? Like Juliet, I started my public relations journey in the big agency world. And in full transparency, when you're working with an agency, the client often interfaces with senior leadership only when they're signing the contract or something needs to be troubleshooted, but the work itself gets farmed down the food chain. And so when you hire individual consultants like Juliet, like myself, you get to have the individual that is the thinker, that is the doer, working by your side every step of the way. I pride myself, Juliet prides herself on being able to blend that high level strategy with a hands-on execution. So when you hire a communications consultant today, you get not only the skill, you get the talent, you get our energy, but you also get that added bonus of fresh perspective informed by our own experiences working with clients across diverse industries.
If I could just say one more thing, I've lived long enough to have experienced several chaotic times in the economy. I lived through the 2008 economic crash. I lived through 9/11. And I've never seen something like this. I mean, this is, we use the word unprecedented. It truly is unprecedented. And for me specifically, I work quite a bit in global health. And not only is this impacting and, making it a chaotic environment, it's effectively decimating that entire sector, which is really just really disheartening. It's far more than just a shakeup. And so, tens of thousands of people who are now going to be out of work, organizations that are entirely going under. We don't know how or even if our work is going to continue forward. That makes me more fired up than ever to fight. I think the mission of this work is so incredibly important. It is literally saving lives. And so, I think all hands on deck. And again, as flexibly as we can do that, is gonna be super important as organizations and the sector work to rebuild.
Thank you, Juliet, and thank you, Emma. You both touch on this idea that there's so much really in flux with the world right now. So with all the concerns that are really facing nonprofits, why should they prioritize communications?
Change is today's constant. And again, organizations still have to meet the moment. At the end of the day, your services are still needed. Take global health, for example. The USAID overhaul has upended how NGOs do their work. But the reality is, even though there are stark funding gaps, NGOs can't simply rely on foundations to scoop in and fill the missing pieces. And so diversified funding and the strategic outreach that anchors that work requires smart communications that's adaptive and audience tailored. And, that's where communications consultant comes in. So you need an email fundraising strategy, you need a social media campaign implemented, a revamped messaging deck for your meetings with new donors, talking points as you engage media. We're by your side to ensure that no matter the changes on deck, you're out in front, primed to meet the moment.
I mean, I'm really glad that you mentioned fundraising, Emma, because that's so important. I don't know why communications is always thought of as sort of a luxury line item, even in good times. It's always sort of a nice to have, but not a need to have, or at least it's thought that way. Obviously, I come to it with a different perspective. I think communication is absolutely integral to achieving any organizational goals. As Emma mentioned, funding is absolutely imperative right now. And it always is, but right now it's utterly existential. But how do you do that if you don't have a compelling story and a well-articulated case for support, especially right now as every nonprofit is approaching a very small pool of donors? How are you going to make your story stand out? How do you get them to pay attention? And I see so many organizations doing incredible work, but they don't necessarily see, to them it's just their day to day. They don't see what's going to make them stand out to a donor or other stakeholders like, volunteers who could be future donors. Fundraising is just one area that communications can support right now. Another, for example, is advocacy. There's so many ways we need to be pushing back on what's happening in our country right now. Democracy, human rights, equity, these are all things that are being trampled on. The secret is communications can really help you do your job as an advocate or a lobbyist. Let us pave the way. Let us soften the environment for you. So by the time you get into that meeting with a staffer or a member of Congress or even someone in the administration, they may have already heard your message. So, and certainly we can help build grassroots support and we can get your message out in the media. There's so many ways we can be helping. And so, I think there's a lot communications can and should be doing right now.
Thank you. And question 3 also addresses the rapid changes happening in our world right now, but from more of a technological perspective. What would you say to a person who asks you, why would I hire a communications consultant when I could just use AI?
So I'll be honest, I was slow to use AI. I did feel a little threatened by it. I recognize that now I'm at a professional disadvantage if I don't use AI. But I no longer think it's a threat to me, having kind of played around with it more and more. I feel like it's a complement to what I do. And I don't think it can do our jobs for us. I don't know if this will change, but right now it needs to be carefully directed and the outputs need to be shaped. And I mean, I can tell when something is entirely written by AI. I'm sure a lot of people can. So no, I don't think you can do our jobs with AI. And I think AI, even the deliverables from AI need significant input to be something that could be shared with a variety of audiences.
Well, I just updated Imprint's website, and the tagline now says, "In a world consumed by AI, stand out without selling out." AI, I definitely think, is an effective complement to the work that we do as communicators. I've seen AI segment broad audience buckets, offer generalized suggestions for tailored messaging, and it's certainly a fabulous start. But I come back to your business goals aren't broad and your funding needs aren't general. AI won't give you the precision that you need, but a communications professional will. So specifically, I just launched story coaching for therapists, and the thought being that individuals are turning to AI for pseudotherapy. What does it look like for private practice owners, therapists who are operating in cash-based private practice environments? What does it look like for them to still stay relevant in a space in which people can turn to AI for therapeutic answers, if you will? And on the flip side, how can you support therapists to build their capacity to see things like AI, things like ChatGPT as a complement to their marketing offerings? In that, how can you support them with the prompts that can expand precise marketing in a way that AI alone can't do?
Many nonprofits in today's environment might be thinking, we don't really need a new strategy or a new plan. What we really need is just implementation. So, why might a nonprofit like that look into hiring a communications consultant instead of an agency?
There's always value in going the big agency route instead of going with an individual consultant, right? They have large networks, they have large contacts, they also have a large price tag. We, as individual consultants, are not offering what big agencies offer. We're offering you extra arms, extra legs to get the work done, everything from high level thinking to hands on doing. So when you hire a small independent consultant, you don't just get the strong writer, the strategic thinker, the social media wizard. You also get access to graphic design support, to SEO expertise, to media relations experts. There's this renewed focus on fractional executives. And so if you have budget for just one hire, why really should you invest in one chief communications officer who may be far removed from the tactical work? Instead, if you use that same amount of money, if not often less, to engage independent consultants, you have the ability to expand and contract based off of what your constantly evolving needs are.
It's funny because Emma actually was the person who said this to me a couple weeks ago. And this is sort of the way I would say our team works. And she said, something like, hire one, get for the cost of one, you get 3 or 5 or whatever the case may be. Because as Emma said, you're not just hiring me when I enter into contracts or scopes of work. It's me plus graphic designers, plus social media community managers, plus an SEO wizard, plus a website developer. There's this incredible team, but you're for less than the cost of one senior person in-house. So it is really incredibly scalable. But also, I would say we can do both, right? Like we can do the big strategic thinking, and I love doing that. I love, coming in and sort of assessing a communications program in an organization and finding the gaps between where you are today, where you want to be, and how to bridge them. I love that. But I also know that sometimes it's more about, an organization that's in a crisis moment and just needs someone to come in, roll up their shirt sleeves and get in the mix and just, run with it. Or sometimes literally all someone needs is, can you write this op-ed for me? Or can you help get this event off the ground? And that's fine too. So we can do all of those things, and you can pick and choose what makes the most sense. Clients often ask me, like, do you want to work on a retainer? Do you want to work on a project team? At the end of the day, it's really about what the client wants. It doesn't, I mean, I have my preferred ways of doing things, but I'll work in the ways that work best for the client. Same thing with strategy and tactics, whichever is most necessary to you to meet your objectives. That's what I'm going to do.
All right, thanks to you both. And we are on to question 5. Why is it often helpful to hire a communications consultant who isn't necessarily a subject matter expert?
You want your communicator to be good at communications. You don't necessarily, and again, intellectually curious, but you don't need them to be an expert on your business because you're the expert on your business. So when I started my career, I started out in big PR agencies and was the very definition of a generalist, because when you're a junior person at an agency, you have to do what is thrown at you. So I worked on everything from consumer products to technology to professional services firms, and everything in between. But as communicators, that is our job. We are not subject matter experts, nor would you want us to be, because there are subject matter experts who are way smarter at any given topic than I am. But what was always consistent in my job, no matter what sector I was working on, were the communications fundamentals. Writing, media. Then it became social media and all the various sort of functional skills that communicators needed to be good at. That's what you're coming to me for, coming to Emma for. You're not coming to me to be an expert in global health on any particular topic. And even today, people do want to pigeonhole me as being a global health communicator. Well, what does that mean, really? I work on everything from HIV to global reconstructive surgery to zoonotic spillover to vaccines, whatever the case may be. Those things are so wide and varied, but I can work effectively on all of them.
Juliet's comment about transitioning from media to social media made me think of back in the day when you used to pitch reporters and you would pick up the phone to call. And I remember early in my PR agency days, you'd have a roster of like 100 reporters you were calling. But in terms of your PR or your communications or your marketing individuals not being subject matter experts, that's a benefit to your organization, because as an organization, your end audiences aren't always industry experts. And yet, too often organizations talk to their end audiences as if they are. So whether you're in femtech and you are lobbying policymakers to clamp down on big tech censorship, or you're a nonprofit implicated by the USAID cuts and now working to diversify your funding, your message faces steep competition. And the 2 words that really stand out right now in terms of your messaging is you need clear and you need compelling messaging. In short, to cut through the noise, your message has to be easily understood by the end audiences with your future in their hands. I love to say when I'm working with clients and sort of, supporting them to join that journey of what does it look like to tailor content accordingly to the audiences you're trying to reach. I always say, imagine you're at Thanksgiving dinner and you've gotten a photo of that Thanksgiving dinner and you show it to your colleagues. The way you describe that photo to your colleagues who were not at that Thanksgiving dinner and do not know the individuals in that photo is very different than how you would explain that photo to the people who were at that dinner. That's smart communications. It is adaptive to your end audiences, so you don't have to be an expert in either complex or unfamiliar topics. And lastly, I think the ace up communications, the sleeves of communicators is that we soak up information like a sponge and we ask those hard questions. What does this mean? Would a 5th grader understand what I'm saying? Why does this framing matter? And what are the external forces that could implicate how my message is received?
Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today. And we are going to wrap up with just one quick question to summarize everything. If you could say just a few words to a potential client or just to the general public about communications and about your work in this field, what would that be?
Change is today's constant and you have to meet the moment. That's where external communications, public relations, and marketing comes in. Even with budget cuts, contracts being wiped out, industries being decimated. The services, the end services are still needed, meaning that the work that your organization does must continue. How your organization does it will need to change, which means that the audiences you're reaching will need to change. And that's where strategic communications comes into play.
Yeah, so we're at a very, very chaotic point right now, for sure. Again, unprecedented. Word of the day, word of the decade. And maybe I'm a little biased, but I definitely think communications is an essential part of the solution. But let's not take too long to start fighting back, because we've been in a defensive posture now for, it feels like 2 decades, but it's really only been 2 months. But we need to think about what to do next. We need to get proactive. We need to, as Emma was talking about clear messages, we need a clear, simple message. We need a rebrand. And obviously, I think communications is an essential part of that. And supporting sectors like global health and mission-driven organizations, human rights. That's why I do what I do. So I am ready to fight. I know all of you on the video today are ready to fight. So, just put me in, coach. We're ready to play.
Did you hear my dog barking?
That's what mute's for, baby. We're nimble, we're flexible.